Apparently it was a popular decision.
Welcome to the BJ Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John, they're the ones to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the BJ Show. BJ Show.
John, I had a nasty comment made to me yesterday about our intro.
And was it made by me during the show?
No.
Because most nasty comments directed toward you are from me, Brett.
No, it was made by a listener who said that our intro is appropriate because it talks about everybody lose control and the fact that most of our listeners are probably wearing Depends and don't have any control anymore.
Well, I think that's fair. I mean, I think we brought that up on day one, didn't we, Brad?
Yeah, I guess we did.
But they're losing control because they're laughing, Brad. What other show can make people laugh while teaching them about Missouri and national politics?
I don't know. Is there another show like that? Is it maybe?
I think it's rare.
Is it maybe John Carney? John Carney, maybe? No.
Yeah, I think it's the big bumper.
Is it J.C. Corcoran, who once again?
He's broadcasting from a boat, isn't he?
You know what? He was doing
It's yacht rock, Brad. Why don't you get down with yacht rock? That's your age demographic.
It's funny you should bring that up because I heard that on another station. They were explaining what yacht rock was, and I'm thinking to myself, God, this is so weird. You know, I mean, all these.
Hey, that's your generation, Brad.
Well, all these crazy different classifications for music. Okay, when I first got in the radio business, matter of fact, I went to work on my dinosaur, but there was rock. There was country. There was. Matter of fact, at the time it was called soul or R&B. Now you got all these subdivisions. You've got like classic rock and AOR, album-oriented rock, which is still sort of like Casey. Then you've got new country. You've got classic country. All sorts of different things.
Outlaw country.
Outlaw
Remember, that's
country.
a station on XM or Sirius, whatever it is.
Right.
Country.
Okay, so what would you say our show is? I mean, if you were going to say, if you were a program director and you'd say, well, that Brad and John, they are what format would you say we are?
I would say it's political rock. I mean, most of the songs that you put together, whether it's the Dua Lipa singers or whether it's the Barbershop Quartet, I think you could, first of all the music rocks. And then secondly, it's generally in a political vein, is it not?
Well, and the important thing is, you said it before, if we can bring a smile to someone's face, I'm happy and they're happy and everybody's happy because of the fact that I think there are so many things now that bring us down in a day, all the negative stuff we hear and all the blah, 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 blah. It's to the point where sometimes you just got to be sort of mindless humor, right?
And a lot, I was thinking that exact same thing. I was driving and listening to a different station yesterday, Brad, and I was thinking, I think I would really like this guy in real life, but he just seems so angry. He seems very mad. And Brad, also when you talk about people being outlandishly angry for no real reason, that kind of leads us into our headlines today.
Well, before we get into that, I just want to say, and by the way, was that 93.3 you were listening to?
I was listening to a radio station in the St. Louis market, Brad. That's for sure.
He's not going to say, okay, John, I'm going to ask you an important question.
Yes.
Do you have a dentist? Do you have a dentist that you like?
I do, yeah.
Could you give me off-air recommendation because of the fact that I need to see a dentist, and I need to see a dentist today because you know why I can't see a dentist tomorrow?
Why is that?
They're all closed.
Wow, really? No appointments on Friday?
Well, they're fine. Most dentists only work Monday through Thursday, and I'm not kidding. I mean, if it's one of these things, I've said this before, and people go, well, that's not true. And then they found out the hard way that, like for example, there's a dental office that I drive by, on a regular basis. On a Friday, there's no cars in the parking lot. None. So there's no.
Yeah, there is a dentist, Brad, in St. Charles County who I would go to for, and theoretically, I would go for fun. It's that good of an office, Brad, and I'll give you the off-air recommendation.
Okay, because as crazy as it may sound, I think I did some damage. And you're going to laugh when I tell you this, or maybe you won't. Working at the transmitter site where I ran my face up against something and something hit one of my front teeth and actually chipped it, but I think I damage the nerves or something like that. So.
Oh, yeah. You got to be careful what you bury your face into these days, Brad.
That's what John said. Okay. Casey, are you there?
I'm Casey Kasem.
He's there. And we start with?
In third place.
A whole lot of outrage, Brad. And it's placed in the right direction, and it's placed at the right man. And that outrage is against Bill Eigel. Why do you think people are mad, Brad?
Because he won't come on our show anymore?
No. That's factually incorrect because we don't give him an invite because we had him on more times than we really need to, Brad. No, I'm going to read you a headline from the Kansas City Star today, Brad, and I hope you get as mad as I do. Missouri Republicans TV ad called Racist uses Spanish translator to vow deportation. Now, that is a good objective headline, wouldn't you say, Brad?
Don't get me going about this in journalism. It just
I
drives
think
me nuts.
I mean, just call a guy racist in the headline, and then that way you set the stage for a really fair discussion throughout the article. Now, you say, John, I bet a lot of outlets wrote about the Bill Eigel ad. Why do you call out the Kansas City Star? I'll explain it to you, Brad. Because not only do the KC Starbois give a really objective headline here, but it is countered by Tony's Kansas City. Now, Tony Mateo is a real-life Hispanic, Brad. He's a real-life man. He's not a hologram. He's a real man living in Kansas City. And before I went to Tony's website today, which I go to most every morning, I thought, hey, I bet Tony's going to have something to say about the Eigel ad, good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Here's what Tony Mateo, a real-life Hispanic man, has to say. Missouri Gov contender Bill Eigel produces hilarious deportation advert in Espanol. So Tony goes on to explain how, as a Latino, I guess it would be more accurate to call Tony a Latino. I'm not sure which he prefers. I know he doesn't like Latinx, but or Latinx, whatever it's called these days. Anyway, Tony goes on to talk about his opinion of the Kansas City Star, or excuse me, of the Bill Eigel deportation ad, which is counter to the lecturing we get from the Kansas City Star about how Bill Eigel is such a racist for this ad.
The interesting thing, you and I have talked about this before, the fact that Bill Eigel is getting tremendous amounts of earned media. Paid media is when you buy an ad on the radio or TV or something like that. Earned media is when people write about you or do stories about you, which is exactly what's happening with the Kansas City Star and also with Tony as well, too. So Bill Eigel is essentially extending his budget by not spending any money by getting all this earned media. Now, once again, goes back to one of my original bosses. I always say there's 3 impressions you can make in life, good, bad, none, and none is always the worst. If you look at that philosophy, then Bill Eigel, once again, is right on track. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and in fact, some of the media outlets point out that Bill Eigel's campaign. Now, I didn't read this firsthand, so this is secondhand. But Bill Eigel's team apparently sent out a press release yesterday afternoon, or they issued a statement talking about how many impressions their ad got. So, which I think is just fantastic.
Once again,
put an ad out, get people mad, get people outraged, have everybody share it and talk about how mad they are, and then go out again and say, thank you. We've had millions of impressions of this ad.
Well, once again, earned media, and then it's sort of like, and then the going, as you say, going out again is sort of like an FY, like hey,
or GFY, go forget yourself,
right,
or good for you. Now, I would also point out too, folks can go to my website today and find Pete Mundo. Let's keep it in Kansas City. Pete Mundo had an interview with Mike Kehoe. I have that up today, and then he also, Mike Kehoe was out on the campaign trail, and This Week in Missouri Politics did a live stream from a Mike Kehoe event. In full disclosure, I didn't watch the whole live stream. It's about 55 minutes. But if you want to see Mike Kehoe talking on the stump to a group of supporters, you can find that there.
Do you think that this is an aside? Do you think that Mike Kehoe is doing himself a favor or a disfavor by dodging the debates?
I think it's probably the right thing for him to do.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if he got up on stage, he would have both Ashcroft and Eigel going after him about raising the gas tax. I think he could handle the China thing pretty well. Honestly, I think that he would be able to answer questions about the fact that China is not the same country today as it was in 2013. He could rationalize the Smithfield Foods thing and the foreign land thing. I think he could handle that pretty well. I don't think he wants to be on stage talking about the gas tax. I don't think he wants to talk about some of the comments he's made about abortion exceptions. That's my take on it. And you'll remember, Brad, if we go back 2 years ago, during the height of the U.S. Senate Republican primary here, Eric Schmidt got a lot of flack about not wanting to debate and not wanting to be on stage with everybody. And he was seen as being unwilling to share a stage with a bunch of people lobbing grenades. And I think it's a pretty safe strategy. So, and also, Brad, you look at the polls. If Kehoe and Eigel were flipped, maybe Kehoe would feel differently about it. But I think if you're Mike Kehoe now, you have so much money that for the last less than 2 weeks, you do just a ton of media. You keep hitting Bill Eigel because Bill Eigel had ascended in the polls. And stay off the debate stage. What do you have to gain?
Well, and I want to thank all those politicians who are investing their hard-earned dollars in this locally owned radio station. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Now, Brad, in the new era of your life, are you going to continue to complain about radio advertising?
Let's just move on, John.
Up a notch to number 2.
A surprising or not so surprising endorsement from the Post-Dispatch, depending on how you view their editorial board, Brad. If you think that the Post-Dispatch editorial board is generally out of touch and liberal, you may have assumed that they would support Cori Bush. But no, in fact, today they have endorsed Wesley Bell for Congress over Cori Bush.
Interesting.
And we should also note the third major candidate in that race, which is former State Senator Maria Chappelle-Nadal. Now, to be fair, some folks would say this is not surprising because the Post-Dispatch has been critical of Cori Bush over the years, has been critical of the squad, and has said that essentially Cori Bush is a bomb thrower and a fringe member of Congress, a backbencher, if you were. I don't think you can call black women, tell them they have to sit at the back of the chamber, but you know what I mean. A fringe member of the Democratic caucus, and talked about how Wesley Bell has done a good job of doing that dance between progressivism and actually not hating police officers and the cops. And they say that he is an excellent candidate and will make an excellent member of Congress, Brad.
Well, I have heard through the grapevine that the St. Louis County Police Department have a pretty good relationship with him, and he's actually been fairly decent to them. Have you heard that as well?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, early on the knock against him was the traditional, hey, he is a Soros-supported prosecutor. And I think he's done whatever steps he's taken to temper that. They've been effective. I think a lot of people would say he's not as bad as we thought he could be.
Well,
now, if you're a Maria Chappelle-Nadal, for example, you would say that's not nearly good enough to be a St. Louis County prosecutor, and that's not nearly good enough to be a member of Congress. And if you're Cori Bush, you would say, well, we don't know, Brad, because she won't debate.
Well, I will say one tremendously positive thing about Wesley Bell. He's never been seen working on his nursing degree during business hours.
That's true. He's never been seen working on his nursing degree,
right,
Brad. And let's also face it, Brad, he is a graduate of Hazelwood East High School.
Is he really?
Yeah, so we would know that his intellect is far superior. I usually preface that with college preparatory institution, Hazelwood East High School. Yeah, we didn't overlap. He was I think he graduated in 92, and so that was before I was there.
Interesting. So how old is he then? 92? That would make him what?
He would be he'd be 4 years older than me. So he's ancient. He's like 50, Brad.
Oh my God.
God. Like, how much longer do you want to live once you're 50?
And he's still,
don't you just?
And he's still got all his hair. That's the amazing thing.
And he's still working. Yeah, right, that's for sure, Brad.
He hasn't retired. He hasn't. he hasn't cashed in his 3 years of unused sick leave and vacation time. Right. Okay.
He's not an MSD employee. But you know who is cashing in on their pension, Brad? The star of story number 1.
The number 1.
Pete Mundo over in Kansas City had U.S. Congressman Mark Alford on. And Alford was talking about the resignation of Kimberly Cheadle, Brad. And in fact, Mark Alford pointed out that Kimberly Cheadle will still get a pension, okay? So let's not cry for Kimberly Cheadle. But he also talked a little bit about how the FBI is leading the investigation, really looking into what happened at the Trump assassination attempt, where the security failures happened. And Alford seemed to have a lot of confidence, at least expressed in this interview, and the FBI's ability to interview witnesses, interview the family of the shooter, find out details about what really happened. And then Alford capped the interview at the end by talking about how Kamala Harris refused to attend the address given by Benjamin Netanyahu, and then some of the hijinks that happened after that. And I think most folks have seen some of the clips on social media of the unrest, of the fiery but mostly peaceful protests outside the Capitol, Brad. So that's our number one story today. Mark Alford on Pete Mundo's show.
John, I just don't understand the whole thing. I don't understand. I mean, and to the point where somebody was playing audio. Once again, I punched the button on the radio so many times. Somebody was punching audio, and they were saying the story started out as like, and even though there's unrest with the anti-Israel movement, there's no name calling or anything like that. And then they have some guy, they have a cut of some guy leading a chant, and during the chant he's going by, he's like the pro-Palestinian stuff, and then he makes some comment about we don't want no dirty Jews, and I'm going like, okay, hold on a minute now. Isn't that blatant anti-Semitism? I mean,
yeah, I would think so. Now let's admit too, Brad, that you've told stories in the past of how in your high school days you dated a Jewish woman.
I did.
So I mean, and that was what you haven't talked about is how the Anti-Defamation League and AIPAC began brainwashing you and turning you into a Zionist.
You know what?
I mean, you've talked about that off air when we talked about dentist recommendations.
John, I'm the guy, once again, I'm the guy that's like, the right to swing your fist ends the tip of my nose. I don't really care. And once again, I told you that guy I heard, I can't even remember who it was anymore. It was like a couple weeks ago. He was a Jewish guy, and he went into this dissertation about the Jewish people are the most accomplished people in the world. And he goes through this whole thing and everything. I'm going like, yep.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, what's interesting about this is from a musician friend of mine. He says there was a time when most of the very accomplished musicians, especially most of your symphony musicians, were Jewish, because of the fact that was pushed, by the Jewish people, that you are not only a smart person, you become a doctor or a lawyer, but you become excellent in the arts, being, playing an instrument or anything like that. And he said, this is my musician friend, he says that's changed because the new generation of symphony musicians are, guess what?
They're Asian.
Exactly. So
yeah, if you've seen the movie The Hangover, Brad, you know that, or Hangover 2.
Right, which is sort of interesting because, once again, there's these thing called the tiger moms, the tiger moms who are the Asian mothers who are pushing their kids to excel at everything they do. Be the best at school. Be the best athlete. Be the best person in the school band or the school orchestra. And you're not, and not only do we want you to be the best in your school orchestra, we want you to be the best in the entire area. If there's like an area-wide competition, we want you to be the best violinist and stuff like that. And you look at that and you go like, wow. And to a certain extent, that's sort of the rap, I want to say, against Jewish mothers, but Jewish mothers are notorious for the same thing. Like there's like comedy routines about Jewish mothers saying, my son failed, he's not a doctor or a lawyer, but yet he's like, he's executive of some Fortune 500 company, but according to his mom, he's failed because he's not a doctor or a lawyer. Okay, and once again, I'm not making fun of Jewish people, and I did date a Jewish woman in high school, and her name was Phyllis Quint, and I believe she might have been the only Jewish person in my entire high school, and I always thought she was a wonderful woman, very smart. I mean, God, she was good at math. Oh my God.
Boy, what a stereotype. And by the way, if you're listening to this and you are an Asian tiger mom, you know that recruiting, Brad, for fall baseball leagues is starting right now. If you happen to be a tiger mom in the St. Louis area and your child can hit the cutoff man and knows how to pick up the third base coach as they're coming across second base and isn't ball watching when they should be watching the third base coach, contact me.
John,
We'll talk about your son.
But look at the whole situation with Major League Baseball. There was a time when it was all the whitey dudes, who were all the big stars. Now it's and has been for quite some time. Remember Tony La Russa? This was one of the big fights that Tony La Russa had with the Wizard, Ozzie Smith. Ozzie Smith claimed that Tony La Russa was prejudiced against black people because he loved the Latino ball players. He loved the Dominican Republic and things like that. So
no, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead, Brad.
Well, we still have the huge influence of those Caribbean area ball players. And now the Japanese ball players, because what's the guy's name? I can't even pronounce it. What's the guy's name?
Ohtani.
Yes, Ohtani. Yeah, and there's been others as well too. So those are the big stars now. So not.
And you know who very famously came to prominence in the 1980s? Who's related to Ohtani?
Who's that?
Ohtani Kitaen. That took me a minute, Brad. I had to think of her name. Yeah, Ohtani Kitaen is one of my favorites.
Isn't that Tawny Kitaen?
Oh, that's who it is. I was picturing a little Asian dancing on a car, but you're right. It's Tawny Kitaen. Who married Chuck Finley. Remember Chuck Finley was a Major League Baseball player.
Hold on a minute.
I don't even know where to start from all of the things that have been said that are just wrong.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?